The White House just released the 2025 National Security Strategy, and I did the thing that no one in Washington actually does. I read all 33 pages, and yes, that's how I spent my entire flight home from a NATO cyber warfare exercise in Estonia, reading this and then writing the script. And since I'm back home and still awake, let's shoot a video. Quick reminder, there is still time to get my NORAD Christmas and Hanukkah sweaters from Bunker Branding. You know, if you want to look festive while contemplating your great power competitions. It also helps when you go to your wife or girlfriend's Christmas party and you want people to talk to you because it's got Canadian and American fighter planes on the front. Now, national security strategies are supposed to answer 3 kindergarten level questions here. What do we want? What tools do we have? And how do we match these tools with reality? But this document kind of swings between sober strategy, campaign one-liners, and a few moments where I swear I heard your uncle posting on Facebook. So today we're going to break this down into the good, things that make strategic sense, the bad, which is ideology pretending to be strategy, and the ugly, parts that could actually warp U.S. foreign policy for a decade. By the way, if you want to read the document, it's available at ryanmcbeth.substack.com. And like always, I'm not like red team good, blue team bad. I call balls and strikes. And you know what else is great for that? Ground news. This Christmas, give your parents a gift that will keep on giving throughout the year, ground news. My dad is 86 years old. All he does is watch TV news all day, which means he is incredibly misinformed. I got him a ground news account. I paid for it. Ground news didn't give it to me for free because that's how much I believe in this service. Give ground news as a gift to your parents this year. Ground news is a news aggregator. It shows how a story is being covered on both the left and the right. It also gives you the ownership data, the average factuality rating, and the bias of the publication so you know who is telling you what to think. And this blind spot report is the best because it shows you stories you might have missed due to your own political biases. For example, do you know that Egypt has already trained hundreds of policemen as a stabilization force for Gaza? No outlets on the left covered this. Or did you know that the state of New Hampshire decided not to cover weight loss drugs because of potential federal funding cuts from the Trump administration? 0 outlets on the right covered that. Fact is, your parents are probably still getting their news from Facebook, and that's bad. So this Christmas, let's not make it a fight. Click the link in the description below, hit the QR code somewhere up here, go to ground.news/Ryan to get 40% off the Vantage plan, which is what I got for myself and my dad. The good, number 1. This document admits that past strategies were kind of clueless. Page 1 openly says that earlier strategies were basically laundry lists with no prioritization. And this is a rare moment of honesty. It also admits that elites misjudged what we should want after the Cold War. And yeah, we absolutely did. We saw Russia was kind of over, so we downsized the army, downsized the navy, got rid of bases with BRAC, we got rid of ships, and then we act shocked when we couldn't remake Afghanistan into like a Jeffersonian democracy, right? We were looking at Afghanistan and we're going like, hey, how come these people don't want to follow the same system of government? How come they want to still live in the year 800? Just because that really wasn't a priority for them. It was a priority that we wanted, but not something that they wanted. And a strategy that actually prioritizes things you can do instead of daydreams is good. Number 2, it sets some clear national objectives. The strategy states the U.S. goal very plainly. Ensure America remains the world's strongest, richest, most powerful, and most successful country. Now, I'm going to kind of do my William Spaniel lines on maps impression here. This is an ends and means coherence problem. The end is to remain system dominant. The means are industrial base, alliances, and military capacity. If means are less than ends, you get strategic insolvency. If ends are greater than means, you get Afghanistan. That's my little William Spaniel. He was on the NATO cyber event as a journalist, by the way. And, you know, for once, the NSS actually acknowledges this gap instead of kind of imagining or pretending that vibes can substitute for actual power. Number 3, flexible realism. We're basically saying the quiet part out loud here. Page 9 basically says, we can maintain relations with countries whose values differ from ours. That's not hypocrisy. And the translation to that is, yes, we know the Saudis chopped up a journalist, but also stuff happens.
A lot of people didn't like that gentleman that you're talking about. Whether you like him or didn't like him, things happen.
Or maybe freezing Russia at the current lines of control in Ukraine will help us extract minerals from Russia later. This sounds morally gross, but strategically, at least the US is saying, here is our worldview. It's cold, but it's consistent. You know, my two favorite presidents were President Truman and President Reagan. Truman, because he dropped a chunk of the sun on Japan to end a war early. And Reagan told the Soviets to tear down a wall because America was supposed to be that shining city on a hill.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
This document feels more like, keep the wall up, but give us a cut. That is morally ugly, but it is strategically transparent, and that transparency has value. Fourth good thing is an actual industrial-based strategy. Page 14 says reshore industrial production, and this is great news, finally. Rare earth magnets, rare earth minerals, semiconductors. We shouldn't depend on our adversaries for stuff that makes our weapons work. The computer chips of today are the steel of World War II. Back in World War II, if you couldn't make steel, you couldn't make tanks, you couldn't make ships. Today, if you can't make ships, you don't have weapons. But basically every president has said this, and I have yet to see any president have some kind of initiative to get people to take up welding in high school, get people to take up electrical work. We need those people to reinvigorate our industrial base and to actually perform some of our shipbuilding. What I want President Trump to do is create a program and say, we're teaching welding in high school again. We're teaching welding to everybody, right? Until then, this is just a wish list. Number 5 is a realistic view of China. Page 19 basically says that we thought China would liberalize if we traded with them, and we were wrong. China used the trade and its new role as the factory of the world to build the world's largest navy. This is exactly what happened in my alternate history novel, Lies to Rule Men and the Last Republic, where Brigham Young founded the state of Deseret as opposed to the territory of Utah, his own country in the middle of the United States. And every U.S. president since 1851 assumed that Deseret would eventually join the Union if we were nice enough to them. And then one day, Deseret bought Iranian missiles that could hit Oregon, and we decided to do something about it. Sometimes the world just doesn't want to be who we want them to be. And this section of strategy is very sober and it's grounded, and it doesn't kind of hallucinate a friendly China emerging anytime soon. And this is just a reality that we're going to have to work with. Number 6, burden sharing that actually sounds like burden sharing. Page 12 says NATO allies must carry more weight. A new Hague commitment asks for 5% GDP spending on defense. Honestly, this is long overdue. We've been saying it for a while. Well, I did not particularly agree with the way Vice President J.D. Vance said this, I believe back in February of 2025, because I went to NATO a week later and had to deal with that. He's not wrong. He's not wrong. It probably just could have been phrased in a different way. And Europe is slowly starting to pick up some of their weight when it comes to defense spending. Number 7, the era of mass migration is over. This document frames border security as national security, and they're not wrong. After years of ignoring the southern border, this section is pretty darn blunt. I have crossed enough borders just recently, from Estonia or from the US into the EU and Estonia and then back into the US. A country has a right to know and decide who enters it. This is just common sense. I was alive during 9/11. We need to know who is in this country and why. So protecting our borders is just common sense. Number 8, calling out foreign influence operations. Page 10 says the U.S. will unapologetically protect its sovereignty, including from censorship, influence operations, and efforts to drag the U.S. into foreign conflicts. I have said for years, influence operations are weapons systems. Ignoring them is how democracies kind of get fried from the inside. Now let's talk about the bad. Number 1, the section on DEI feels like a Facebook rant. Page 6 says they're rooting out DEI because it threatens national security. Look, you can argue on DEI and its merits, fine, but it has no business being in a national security document. The military is still the closest thing we have to a meritocracy. You can either land the plane or you can't. There's no woke ideology getting forced on warfighters. And if there was, it was a single slide during the yearly mandatory training where we're told, hey, don't sexually harass people, and if someone identifies as transgender, just do your best to call them by their preferred pronoun. That's it. Their DEI training is done. Now, the second bad thing, number 2 here, there's a paranoia about foreign voting blocs. Page 10 warns about immigration used to create foreign loyal voting blocs. And this is kind of with zero evidence. This kind of harkens back to the 1884 presidential election where the Democrats were called the party of rum, Romanism, and rebellion. And that was because a lot of Irish Catholics were Democrats. It was believed their loyalties were to the Pope in Rome, not to America. And today, I guess the popular trope is that like mass South American immigration into the U.S. would happen because the Democrats weren't very good with policy. They couldn't win on policy. So let migrants come in, give these migrants free stuff, and then give them citizenship, and they'll vote for you in elections because people who take free stuff will always vote for more free stuff. I think that was the idea that a lot of people said was happening with the open southern border. And this kind of feels like someone copied and pasted a Facebook comment thread into the NSS draft because this has nothing to do with foreign policy. And I'm not sure how many migrants were coming here intending to go and vote legally or illegally. Number 3, Monroe Doctrine 2.0, but kind of angrier. Page 5 and pages 15 to 18 basically say, no foreign power may own anything in our hemisphere. We will push out foreign companies. We will use lethal force on drug cartels. And U.S. companies get sole source contracts to develop areas of South America. So this kind of reminds me of the Banana Wars when the U.S. military basically became a subsidiary of the United Fruit Company. If there was a government in South America that wasn't playing ball, we would just send in our troops to stabilize or overthrow that country so the United Fruit Company could keep making a profit. And the spice must flow, right? And we saw it again during the Cold War when the U.S. propped up some pretty evil dictators as long as they were anti-communist. I mean, one of my favorite presidents, Ronald Reagan, sold weapons to Iran in the hopes that the money from those weapon sales would get redirected to Nicaraguan Contra rebels. The Contras were anti-communist, but they also committed some pretty major atrocities. Everybody has skeletons in their closet, but some of those skeletons are baby skeletons. Now let's talk about the ugly. The first ugly item is the civilization erasure in Europe section. Page 25 says that Europe faces civilization erasure, and in 20 years some nations might no longer be viable NATO partners because I guess they'll be predominantly Muslim. And yes, the demographics in Europe are changing. A lot of that is due to migration that Russia manufactured during its intervention in Syria because they knew it would destabilize Europe. Yes, the migration thing is hard, and it can suck if you're in some areas of Europe. And yes, Muhammad is the most popular baby name in the United Kingdom. But you know what? Turkey, up there, Turkey and Albania are NATO members. And I just got back from a NATO event in Estonia where I met the Turks there at the exercise. There weren't any problems. So it's almost like this is some kind of racist or Islamophobic dog whistle that kind of ignores the fact that Turkey has the second largest army in NATO and is one of the NATO alliance's crucial partners. Number 2 of the ugly. Climate change is kind of treated like a meme. Page 14 rejects climate change and net zero as a disastrous ideology. Look, debate net zero policy all day long, but droughts, floods, and food instability cause wars. The Department of Defense literally has climate risk divisions. Even President Trump wanted to annex Greenland.
Well, we need Greenland for national security purposes. I've been told that for a long time, long before I even ran. I mean, people have been talking about it for a long time.
He didn't do that because he thinks puffins are adorable, right? It's because the Arctic shipping lanes are going to open up in that area due to climate change, and Greenland will essentially become a perfect place for controlling that new Northwest Passage. On one hand, you have the president kind of placating his base with anti-climate change rhetoric. On the other, he's preparing for climate change. Finally, number 3, Mideast optimism that borders are a delusion. Page 28 claims that Iran is greatly weakened, Hamas is isolated, Syria might stabilize. This is aspirational. Iran will likely build its nuclear program. Syria is kind of a mess, but I actually have high hopes that that country might become somewhat a stable democracy with rights for religious minorities and women, because we're kind of seeing Syria play ball, at least in that area. And, you know, the one issue with this thought is that the region is really only one bad day away from another regional crisis. There is a reason why we're selling the F-35 to Saudi Arabia. Optimism isn't a strategy, but an F-35 can certainly tilt a balance. And yeah, you know, because the United States is an oil exporter now, we can afford to be a little more selective about what goals we choose to pursue in the Middle East. But Iran is definitely not out of the fight completely. They will rebuild. So what does this all mean? Well, there is more good than bad in this document. The bad stuff is truly bizarre. The ugly stuff risks defining an entire era of American foreign policy. And more importantly here, this document tells you exactly why we're flexing on Venezuela. It's a message to China and Russia, both of whom influence Venezuela, that playtime in our hemisphere is over. And the fact is that if the United States goes to war with China over Taiwan, Venezuela is perfectly positioned to launch cruise missiles at American ships trying to transit the Panama Canal, and that's just not something we would want to have to deal with. So it's easier to take Venezuela out now. You know, one of my favorite YouTubers is this guy named the Feral Historian. Yeah, he does a lot of pop culture stuff, but does it from a very highbrow standpoint. And if he read this document, he would probably say something like this. The U.S. isn't writing a strategy, it's writing an obituary for the post-Cold War world. It's the blueprint for a tripolar era, America, China, Russia. Not good guys and not bad guys, just 3 empires carving the world like a roast, pretending they're different while acting almost exactly the same. Head on over to the Feral Historian's YouTube channel, ask him to review my 2 novels in the Deseret series. I'd like to know what he thinks. After reading this national security strategy, I can tell you this. America isn't Sauron, and America isn't Gandalf either. It's more like we're Tony Soprano with a passport. Capable of kindness, capable of menace, but mostly just interested in the rent. Final thought, you know, maybe America was never the good guy. Maybe we were just the least bad guy. And maybe this national security strategy is the first time we've stopped lying to ourselves about it. Does this strategy make America stronger? Yeah, it actually probably would. Does it come at a cost? Yeah, our soul. Grab my NORAD sweatshirt from Bunker Branding or I'll invade your country. Thank you for watching. Do you have a Christmas party to go to this year and you want to be the coolest guy there? Head on over to bunkerbranding.com. Get my NORAD Christmas sweater. Features a Canadian CF-18 and an American F-22 flying jointly, protecting the skies during Christmas. You will be the coolest person at the Christmas party, and I guarantee you, people who want to talk about fighter jets will come over to you. So head on over to bunkerbranding.com and be that cool guy at the Christmas party.